Today we are participating in a DIY Christmas collab with DIY Next Door. And since everything is better with a twist, today's challenge, we need to incorporate something from the kitchen in each of our DIYs. So without further ado, let's get our DIY on.
For this DIY, we're going to use some butcher's twine and some gold paint. Now I'm using the Art Minds Antique Gold, but you could really use any gold paint, it doesn't really matter. We're going to paint a whole bunch of that rope, making sure that we cover all the sides and that all of that white is covered with that brilliant gold. And then we'll just set that aside until it completely dries. Now I'm using 3 pillar candles. One of them is an actual candle, the taller one, and the other 2, the shorter ones, are battery operated candles, but really at the end of the day, it doesn't matter, use what you have. Now to start, you're just going to tie that butcher's rope to your candle using a double knot, and then you're just going to wrap that twine around until you get the thickness with it that you like. And once you've achieved that, use the 2 ends to tie into another double knot, keeping everything into place. And then move on to the next 2 candles doing the exact same thing. Now for one of the candles, I had some of Dollar Tree's pine picks, and I used my wire clippers to clip down the tops and then use some hot glue to adhere everything into place. Now for an additional kitchen element, I had this star anise, and I decided just to hot glue those on to the front of the candle as well. Now for one of the candles, I had this gorgeous thick wooden snowflake, and I decided just to give it a touch of distressed white chalk paint just to give it a little bit of a frosty look. I hot glued this onto the chef's rope, and then I decided to go in with a little bit of Dollar Tree's white berry strands that they tend to have every year. Hot glue this underneath the snowflake and then just wrap it around the candle, and then hot glue the other end underneath the other end of the snowflake. And for the last candle, I decided to go in with a little bit of Dollar Tree's frosted greenery that comes with their mistletoe picks and some star anise and a few gold berries. They were originally red from Dollar Tree, but I spray painted them gold. And here we have our first DIY with the kitchen twist. And these look gorgeous and they smell good too. Okay, the next kitchen item we're going to use is some baking soda. In a cup, you're going to pour a generous amount of baking soda, and then to that you're going to add some white chalk or acrylic paint. I'm just using some Craft Smart chalk paint in white because it's cheap and I had a lot of it on hand. And you're just going to pour that into your baking soda and then mix that together until you get a consistency that's similar to soft serve ice cream. Now, I had thrifted this candle stand. I liked the look of it, the shape, but I wasn't really a fan of the silver color, so we're going to use this baking soda chalk paint mixture to cover this entire thing with a stenciling brush, making sure that we pounce that on, giving it tons and tons of texture. And then we're going to let that dry overnight. Now, here's a little tip. If you're working with baking soda paint and you've made enough to cover both coats, don't worry about it. Just cover it with a bit of saran wrap and leave that be. It will last for days. The next morning, I added a little bit of folk art chalk paint in French linen to some of the white chalk paint mixture, leaving some of it aside, and then mixed that up, giving me a second more grayish tone to work with. And then again, using a stippling brush, just pounce that on, giving it a lot of texture. Then to that French linen white chalk mixture, add a little bit of black chalk paint. I'm just going with some Art Minds and Onyx, and then stir that in. This will give you a richer, darker gray color to work with next. Blend this grayer color in and kind of bring it back to that white. Use a bit more of that white chalk paint that you've set aside and apply that to on top of your dark gray color. Blending them and working with them both until you create a look that you're really happy with. Then, using a third stenciling brush, go in with a little bit of that black chalk paint and just add a touch of this to the candle stand, blending it out with that white chalk paint paint so that in the end you end up with multiple layers of color and just this really authentic faux stone look. Now you could use this candle stand all year round, but we want to make this a bit Christmassy. So Dollar Tree often comes out with these small little candle wreaths. I bought this a few years ago, but they have them every year. And we're just gonna bulk this up a little bit with some of their pine picks. I still have some of the pine picks from last year. They're a lighter color than this year's pine picks, at least the ones they've come out with so far, and I'm just loving both those colors working together. Now the mini wreath that I was working with had some faux greenery on it that I just wasn't feeling, so I just used some scissors and removed those because I just felt they looked a little too faux. This year I'm all about the antique gold, so we're going to paint the little red berries out with some of this folk art majestic gold paint. I also wanted to give the pine cones a bit of a frosty look to work with the white candle that I was going to place with this, so using a little bit of chalk paint and a stenciling brush, I just applied it to the tips of the pine cone. Then using some hot glue, I simply glued the smaller cut down pieces of pine picks onto the wreath form. I made sure to stagger the two different colors so that it just added a ton of interest. Then for an added touch, I used a little bit more of that frosted greenery that comes with the mistletoe that you can get from the picks at Dollar Tree, and I removed the greenery and just glued that into the arrangement all around the candle using a skewer to really getting that glue to stick. We have it, our second Christmas DIY with a kitchen twist complete. And if you're liking what you see so far, make sure you give me a like and subscribe.
Before we move on to the next DIY, I just wanted to remind you to pop on into that description below, because there you'll find the link to DIY next door. And if you click on that link, it'll take you to her video where I have no doubt she'll have a ton of creative ideas.
For this next DIY, we're going to be using some gold leaf to decorate some jars that came from my kitchen. Go in with a little bit of Mod Podge and apply this to your jar, wherever it is that you want the gold leaf to stick. Next, grab yourself a sheet of gold leaf and apply it to the jar, pressing it lightly down with your hands until the gold leaf sticks to all the places that you've applied the Mod Podge. And then gently peel the sheet back. Now here's another little tip to really work that gold leaf into your jar. Try using a blending sponge. I use these little ones because I get them all the time from Dollar Tree, and you just use this to pounce it up and down, and it will really work that gold leaf into whatever object it is that you're applying it to. Continue the same method to however many jars you're working with. Today I'll be working with 3. This next step is optional. You could leave things as it is with just the gold leaf, or you could apply a top coat on top of the gold leaf before applying some of the chalk paint in the majestic gold, or you can just apply the majestic gold like I'm doing. However, it will likely oxidize your gold leaf, but I'm all for experimenting and I can't wait to see how that ends up looking over time. Plus, like I said, I'm all about that aged gold look this Christmas, so I'm just going to add this and see how it goes. I did love the additional texture that pouncing the paint onto the gold leaf seemed to create. Once everything had had a chance to dry, just go in with a soft paintbrush and wipe away any of that excess gold leaf and smooth out any of the texture that might have been created by the paint. Now you could totally use Dollar Tree picks for this. In fact, I'll show you how I do that in the third one, but I found these faux Christmas trees at Sally Ann and decided that clipping off little chunks of them would be perfect for this DIY. I'm going to keep the bases that they came in. I do like them, but they're a bit farmhousey, and this year I'm going for a little bit more gold and opulence, so we're not going to use those, but we are going to use the greenery. But I'm keeping them because we'll use them in another DIY. Now I always have bags of Miracle-Gro on hand because I have this massive garden, so I had this bag downstairs in the basement and I brought it upstairs to add this to our DIY. So we're just going to pour the mud into each of the jars until they're just about full. Then using some wire clippers, I just cut off chunks of the faux trees, creating these tiny little mini looking Christmas trees. To use the Dollar Tree picks to do this, just slide off the picks that have the whole part attached to it, and then you can just slide those onto one of the other stems, creating a bulkier looking pine tree stem. And then you can use that for your little mini trees instead. Using some moss that I'd bought from the dollar store, I just stuffed a little bit into each of the jars and then stuck the little pine picks into each. I am just loving this natural elegance that this DIY gives off, but I'm dying to know what you think. You can always leave it in the comments below. I am obsessed with these bowls from Dollar Tree. They are perfect for mixing little dressings and dips, but I do have a few too many. So today we're gonna DIY with them. Now you could make these bells any color you want, but again, I'm all about that antique gold this year, so I'm gonna go in with a little bit of Rust-Oleum's metallic spray paint in vintage gold. I'll also be spray painting 2 of these wood rings that came from Dollar Tree. Once all 4 of the bowls had been spray painted in that gold and had been allowed to dry, I went in with a little bit of E6000 around the rim and then a little bit of hot glue so that I could adhere the 2 sides together. And to hold this all in place until it could completely dry, I just used a few of Dollar Tree's little DIY clamps. And then I moved on and did the same thing to the second 2 sets of bowls. Now, although the spray paint is called vintage gold, it was still looking a bit too shiny and new for me. So I'm going to go in with a little bit of this folk art antique gold, and using a stenciling brush, I'm just going to apply that gold paint all over the bowls, really pouncing it on and getting a ton of texture into that. And then I did the same to the 2 wood rings. The easiest way to cut these wood rings down is to use some miter shears, so I just did that, easy peasy. Now when we glued those 2 bowls together, it left a gap between the 2. I wanted to use some caulking to fill this in, but unfortunately, due to a little bit of miscommunication between hubby and I, turns out I didn't have the caulking in the garage like I thought I did. So to solve this problem, I just went in with a hot glue gun, and you can do the same. I just used my favorite fine tip hot glue gun and applied the hot glue around the entire perimeter of the bell, filling in that gap and then smoothing it down with my finger because, well, I don't have feelings in my fingertips anymore. Too much hot gluing. Then to cover that hot glue and put that second coat all over the entire bell, I just went in with a little bit more of that folk art antique gold and the stenciling brush and just filled everything in with that second coat of paint, pouncing it up and down again, going for that texture. I had some chain that was silver that I spray painted gold, and then this step is a little bit extra, but because that gold was a bit shinier than the bells, I just went in with the leftover paint that I had on my stenciling brush and covered the chain with that, and then I went in with a little bit of antiquing wax and added that just to give the chain a bit of a rusty appearance. Then using some free shapes from Cricut, I created these X's with little circles on the end and one in the middle to create that open jingle bell look at the bottom of each of the bells. Now it was time to slide those half wood rings into the bottom parts of each side of the chain. Now unfortunately my chain was really tight, so I struggled a bit here, but eventually I got it on. Some hot glue just adhered those little half rounds to the top middle part of each of the bells. Now remember that pine tree that had all that sparkle on it that I didn't want to use with our other Christmas trees? Well, this time we're going to use it because I think that sparkle is just going to add that right touch. So I just clipped these down and then using some hot glue adhered those to the top of the bell along with some of those mistletoe berries and some of that frosted greenery. And there you have it. The bells are complete. I just adore how these came out, and I think they're going to look so good on my buffet hutch this year. Now for this DIY, we're going to use this old mason jar that I had laying around the kitchen, but I'm not really a fan of this orange seal. So we're going to remove that and then take it outside and give it a quick spray paint with some Rust-Oleum flat black spray paint. Then we're heading to the kitchen where we're going to slice ourselves up one orange and a couple of limes. Pop those slices onto a baking sheet with some parchment paper and then pop them into the oven at 170 until they're completely dried out. Next, I had this bag of cranberries left over, so I'm going to pour those into a glass bowl and then top that with a bunch of boiling water and then just let that sit. You're going to hear pop, pop, pop as those cranberries burst and pop open. Those onto a baking sheet and also bake them at 170 until they're completely dried out. Add to our dry fruit, I had some pine boughs that I cut from the pine tree in our backyard. I love that they come in two different colors, this lighter green that I'm really embracing this winter, and then this darker green that I think just plays really well together. So I started by adding a few of those pine boughs, and then I added some dried oranges, the dried limes. To go with that, I also added some of our dried cranberries, and then I had this jar of cloves that I thought would smell divine, so I added a little handful of that to the mixture. I also had the star anise that we still had some left over, so I added a bit of that. And then the bay leaves I thought would just add a little bit of extra greenery. And next, add a few cinnamon sticks and then just repeat the whole process again until your jar is completely filled with these delightfully smelling goodies. Now you could just leave this jar as is as a decoration, open up the jar and you can smell those scents, or you could use them as a stovetop potpourri.
If you enjoyed those, make sure you subscribe. Give me a thumbs up. If you hit that notification bell, it'll let you know the next time I upload. Oh, and you might enjoy these.